Stanley put pen to paper, as he had done countless times before, but today something was different. The world was different, and he with it. When the travelers arrived 6 months ago, they promised to usher in a new era, one of utopia, in exchange for a place to call home. Leaders bought, governments quarreled, and citizens scrambled to take sides, but in the end, none of that mattered. They made a promise and delivered on it, despite our interference. "What you doing, Stan?" Janie stood by her brother's side and watched as he illustrated his journal with pen and ink. The stylized creatures helped Stanley make sense of the thoughts coming out. The journal helped keep them from escaping into the wild. "Not now, Janie. I have to get this down before I forget. Mom says dinner's almost ready, and today is special and that you ought to come down to the table." She tugged at his suspenders. Stanley ignored her and continued to draw well into the margins. Each creature, with its own unique personality, clawed at the calligraphic letters he adorned with them. He shrugged off Janie with a cold grunt. "I'll be down when I'm done. Now leave me alone." The sounds of silverware clinking against dinner plates punctuated Mother's calls for him. He no longer wished to pretend. Everything wasn't gonna be fine. They weren't still a family without Dad. He'd gone off to fight a war no one understood, in a place that meant nothing to him. The travelers came and promised utopia, but his idea of utopia was shattered when Dad didn't come home. The wars all ended, the hunger all sated, the diseases eradicated, but what about family? How was he supposed to feel about their version of utopia? How can we be expected to live and love and grow when a family is slaughtered by the memories of war? Heavy stuff for a kid. 15 going on 30, Mom always says. Stanley's stomach growled when the smell of ham dinner reached his room. He wanted to eat, needed to eat, but the words and pictures in his head had to go in the journal. He saw them for who they are, monsters here to take all that we have. This utopia is just a placebo. The words came to him, and the fear followed. Echoes of footfalls on the porch were replaced by a front door opening, then shutting. A heavy bag dropped to the wood floor, followed by muffled squeals of excitement and hurried footsteps. A deep, unexpected voice came, and Stanley heard his name. "Dad?" Stanley dropped his pen by the journal. Happy memories of his father filled his head and replaced the grotesque images he had been recording. He pushed back from his desk. The chair followed the grooves worn in the floorboards from years of use until, in his haste, it hit the edge of the rug and toppled over. Stanley paid it no mind as he rushed from his room, slipping and sliding on the wax hardboard, rounding the corner to the stairs and letting his socks catch the runner. With practiced precision, Stanley's newfound purchase allowed his quick descent, and in a flash, he was at the first floor landing. Dad. Not 3 feet from the front door stood a tower of a man in military fatigues, most of his body obscured by Mother's embrace and Janie wrapped tightly around his left leg. Under his brimmed cap, a bandage peeked out, and when he saw Stanley, he smiled. "I'm home, son." The family sat together for the first time in what felt like forever. Mother served the ham, complete with pineapple rings, which she had secured to it with tiny spears of clove. Janie ate more than her share of maraschino cherries, but Stanley didn't mind. The lima beans and carrots seemed to go down easier than usual, and Stanley wondered if this meant he was an adult now. With Dad's hat hung on the rack by the door, it was easier to see his half-shaved head and the bandage that remained. Stanley tried not to stare, but he couldn't help himself. He was sure Dad noticed. When Jeannie and Mother left the table to take the pie from the oven, Dad's attention shifted to him. "Is there something you want to ask me, Stan?" Dad was a no-nonsense sort of man, and despite the nature of his work and the age of his children, he was always honest with them. Always. "Mom said you wouldn't be coming home. She said you were wounded and in a coma, and maybe we could go to see you, but you were never gonna wake up." "That's not a question, Stan." Dad looked down his nose in the way that dads do when they expect you to do better. "How are you here, I guess is the question." Stanley pushed his plate away. The cold of eating carrots and the responsibility of being adult had both lost their appeal. What your mother told you was true. I was hurt, he pointed to the bandage. But now I'm better. Now I'm home. How? Stanley repeated the important part of the question, missing Dad's usual honesty. What was wrong with me couldn't be fixed by our doctors. But their doctors, well, they're just smarter than ours. Do you understand? He gave a smile that expressed gratitude, not only for the chance to live, but to come home and be with his family. I think so, yeah. Stanley noticed the untouched carrots on his dad's plate. Aren't you gonna eat your carrots, Dad? Stanley's father stared at his plate and pushed the carrots around with his fork. Don't tell on me, but I'm saving room for pie. Dad was different, and Stanley tried to reconcile this with his memories. Was it the time that had passed? Was it the head injury? Had the travelers changed the world, or Dad so much he was now some other version of himself? Was it as the carrots and lima beans suggested that Stanley himself was somehow different, and it's he who had changed? I won't tell on you, Dad. Stanley flashed a sly smile and scraped his father's carrots onto his own plate. Moths danced around the spotlight, illuminating the small backyard as father and son tossed a baseball from one warm glove to the other. Dad, pleasantly distracted, watched Mom and Janie through the kitchen window as they washed the dinner plates. Tinny music from a transistor radio on the back porch seemed to complete the return to family life. Isn't this the utopia we had before? What do you make of all this? These travelers that have changed our world. Dad lobbed the ball in the soft arc that Stanley had to catch underhand. No more war, no more hunger. Everyone's working. No one gets sick anymore. And if you get hurt, they fix you right up. What's not to like about it? Stanley wanted to believe the words coming from his mouth, but he wasn't sure he did. I'm sorry it took 6 months to get your old man back. That's not so bad, though. Dad caught the return throw. Stanley shrugged, unsure of how he felt, and tossed the ball back. Did you meet any of them? Actually, see them? No. When I woke up, Army doctors told me what happened to me, and how the travelers patched me up. But they had moved on to another hospital to help other kids' dad by then. Stanley nodded, and awaited the next throw, glove open wide. Teeth brushed and his pajamas on, Stanley waited in his twin bed for his mother to come say goodnight, like always. His mind churned with new ideas and concerns, and though the evening had gone well, he had a pit in his stomach he couldn't deny. He knew this version of utopia felt wrong, but he also wanted his family back as it was before. It felt good to have Dad home. There was a soft knock on the door jab, and there stood Dad in his own pajamas and terry robe. He ran his hands over the cloth to smooth out the hard, bold lines from sitting unused in a dresser for so long, but it only drew more attention to the surreal image. Quite a day, huh? A lot to process, I bet. Dad shuffled in, sat at Stanley's desk and faced the twin bed. Stanley nodded and pulled the flannel covers up closer to his face. I've seen them, Dad. Oh, I don't know about that. They seem pretty shy, from what I can tell. Dad sat back in the wooden chair and folded his arms. Stanley jet out his tin towards the journal on his desk. Dad turned and took the book into his lap, the desk lamp casting just enough light for him to have a look. Dad's posture became more guarded as he thumbed through Stanley's journal. He took quick breaths at the turn of each page. Stanley knew what Dad saw. He wrote it after all. The book told of Stanley's concerns, that the travelers were not what they seemed, that the world's problems hadn't been erased, only changed. The illustrated pages warned of enslavement and treachery, the hideous creatures. The utopia they offered was only a facade meant to slowly take the planet from us. Heavy stuff indeed. Dad closed the journal, took a breath, much deeper than before, and placed the book back on the desk. You're not the only one who feels this way. It's okay to be scared. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know what to believe. Stanley held back tears. Was it the fear he was right? Or was it the prospect of having Dad back? Was it simply the conflict between wanting to live in an idyllic life in what might be a fantasy? Dad nodded over his shoulder at Stanley's journal. Is that how you imagine them? Like those pictures you drew? Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, that's what I see. And when I look, they're not really there. Dad bit the corner of his lip and leaned forward. He made a quick survey of the hallway, then pushed the door closed. We're still fine-tuning that. There's a very small group of you who see what you see. Some don't see what we project at all. Those outliers will need special attention if this is going to work for everyone. Stanley's toes went numb, and his fingers tingled as the shock washed over him. When did you suspect? Dad smiled. The question seemed harmless enough. The carrots. Dad loves Mom's candied carrots. Oh yeah. He pinched his chin, seeming to commit this to memory. Certainly more than her blueberry pie. During the long, awkward pause, Stanley decided the adult thing to do was try and negotiate. Does Mom know? She does. It was never a secret from her. He seemed sincere. Where's my dad? He wasn't sure he was ready for the answer. The man sitting in the chair, the one that looked like Dad, that sounded like Dad, the one that knew everything except to love Mom's carrots, took a moment. None of what you wrote in that book is what's happening, I promise you. Where's my dad? The tingle withdrew as Stanley stilled himself. We've done all the things we promised. Where is my dad? Stanley sat up, determined to hear the truth. In exchange, we needed a place to live, to survive with you. Where is he? Stanley wished this was his father, wished the truth would pour out as easily as if it was his dad. He's gone, son. He's gone. Just gone. Did you kill him to replace him? Did you think we wouldn't know, wouldn't care? Stanley's head was swimming with what all this meant to him, to his family. The man who looked like Dad shook his head at the accusation and shushed Shanley. You don't want to wake Janie up, do you? Do you want to ruin it for her? Stanley thought about whether he did want that or not. He decided no, he didn't. What are you going to do with us? The question came from that place of fear, from the pages of the illuminated manuscript of a frightened teenage boy. Do with you? I'm going to work at a new job and pay the light bill and the water bill and have dinner every night with you. I'm going to be the father you always wanted, always needed, always deserved. And for your mom, I'm gonna be the best version of the man she called husband. And in time, I think the truth won't matter. Your dad couldn't be saved, but there's hope for the rest of you. Is this the utopia you promised? Lies and replacement dads? Stanley wanted to understand. We needed a place to live. Your family needed his father. Your mother volunteered for this program. In exchange for all the things we've done to fix your problems, the first wave of us would assume the lives of loved ones that were lost. Lost to war and violence and illness. Lost to the reality that humans suffer more than they need to. And that's it. That's the grand master plan. Just to fix our broken lives and live in our homes. That's really all you want from us. Stanley wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. Yes. His simple answer to a complicated question felt genuine. Why? Why do any of this for us? Is your kind so advanced? Why not just take what we have? Just take it all. We could, but we've been you. We used to think like you. war and hate like you. We've grown past that, and we want you to also. So now what? Stanley wasn't sure he trusted this replacement. He also knew he was just a kid, not yet a man. A kid that saw creatures in the periphery of his mind. A kid that missed his dad and had reasonably faithful reproduction sitting there, 3 feet away. Now, I go to bed. You go to bed. In the morning, I start a new job, and you go to school. After that, we'll have dinner, during which I will eat all my carrots. Maybe we'll play catch. Maybe if you want, we can talk about where I came from. Utopia won't be easy, but we can take it slow. Stanley rubbed his hands, the tingle completely gone, and he felt as if everything might be okay. It was worth a try, for family's sake. Stanley jetted out his chin again towards the desk, and the traveler turned to shut off the lamp. He stood and opened the door to leave. You can leave it open. Good night, son. Stanley thought about Janie and Mom. Good night.